Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Join the official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to stay updated and get all the materials on the Telegram. The link to the channel can be found in the description box. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from our UPSC Civil Services examination point of view. Now today let us take up the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 5th of April 2022. Now these are the list of the news which we will be taking up for today's discussion, and timestamping for these can also be found in the YouTube description. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion from our prelims and mains point of view. So let's take up these two news appearing on page number 6 in the article section and in the text and context section on page number 8. And both these news is with respect to the aspect of migrants. Now this particular article talks about internal migration. Now internal migration refers to migration within the country, and this news says that caste hierarchies and migration patterns. So this talks about people belonging to certain backward classes moving outside the country. So this is talking about international migration. Now this news says that push the policy needle forward on migrant support. Amidst the scattered experimentation now, the center must offer strategic policy guidance for interstate coordination. Now there are basically two types of migration which takes place internally, that is within the domestic boundaries of India. One is intrastate migration. Now intrastate migration refers to migration within the state, whereas interstate migration refers to migration from one state to another. So that is from state to state. And as per the 2011 census, most of the migration which has taken place in India is the intrastate migration. So in this article, the author says that in India, we do not cater to a central policy or a coherent policy towards migrants. Rather, the policies are fragmented, and because of this, migrants face various issues and are often left out of the policy jurisdiction. Now, the issue pertaining to migrants came to the forefront when national lockdown was imposed because of COVID-19. Now, this article says that even after 2 years of imposition of national lockdown, the migrants who have came back to the place where they were working are finding it difficult to get jobs. And because of this, their family is also suffering as they are not able to provide them quality and nutritious food. So in this news appearing on page number 6, let us first of all understand about the reasons for migration, the benefits for migration, and also the reasons as to why the government of India has not come forward with a coherent policy for migrants. And then we shall look into the aspect of caste hierarchies who are opting to go out of India, where the article says that how economic wealth and ownership of assets via caste network influence international migration. So, with respect to internal migration, this article mentions about fragmented policies which the government of India has pursued, and also a lack of a coherent policy. And these fragmented policies include One Nation, One Ration Card, which provides for the option of portability of ration cards of different states, affordable rental housing complexes for the migrants, e-Shram portal, where the workers from the unorganized sectors can register themselves. Further, there are two legislations also. These are the Interstate Migrant Workmen Regulation of Employment and Conditions of Service Act 1979 and Section 59 of Code on Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions also provides for certain benefits for the migrant workers. Now, despite these fragmented schemes and policies, there is still a lack of a coherent national policy in this regard. Now, people generally migrate for a number of reasons, and this migration can be from rural to rural areas, rural to urban areas, urban to urban areas, or from urban to rural areas. And these are the categories which is generally counted for the purpose of enumeration. So the various reasons for migration includes to avail better economic opportunities, that is for employment purposes, to avail better education for the students. Now, marriage is also another major reason for migration, as women have to migrate to the house of the in-laws, and marriage is one of the major reasons for intrastate migration, that is within the state. Then another reasons for migration includes any conflicts or riots in a particular area, because of which families are displaced. Now, another reasons for migration includes policies of certain states which pursue nativist policies, that is, such policy which favors the son of the soil theory, and because of this, the migrants who are already working in some other states have to move to some other state to find work. And another reason also includes domicile restrictions, which of late has been imposed by some of the states. So all these can be said to be some of the reasons because of which migration takes place internally in India. Now, despite the constraints which are faced by the families of migrants, definitely there are certain benefits for them also. And these benefits includes economic and social emancipation as they get employment opportunities mostly in the urban areas. It fulfills the educational needs of their children. Migration to an urban area or to a mega city also provides better health facilities which is provided by that particular state. And also the scheme of One Nation, One Ration card has fulfilled nutritional requirements as the ration card is now portable across states. So these can be said to be some of the benefits with respect to migration. Now, one of the major points highlighted in this article is that the issue of migrants, especially in certain states, has become a politicized issue. And this has resulted in vote bank politics being pursued by various political parties. And here, these two aspects, that is policies of states which are based on vote bank politics or policies pursuing nativist policies of states and domicile restrictions are on the same line. So one of the major reasons for a lack of coherent policy for migrants across the country is the fact that this issue has become highly politicized, catering to vote bank politics in India. Further, this article mentions about the aspect of destination states or such states having high GDP growth rate. Now, these destination states provide employment opportunities in the field of manufacturing, say services, hospitals, tourism, etc. So, a lot of migrants goes to these states such as Maharashtra, Gujarat, even the Union Territory of Delhi to fulfill their economic needs. So, these destination states having high GDP growth rate and where high employment opportunities are found experience a tension between fulfilling economic needs and also the political needs, as these states mostly pursue nativist policy which favors employment opportunities for the locals. Now, it is mostly understood that the migrants who work in these various sectors works in the informal sector of the economy, and it is here where the vote bank politics takes place. Now, another reason of this vote bank politics is that these migrants who go to these destination states for employment, they mostly vote in their home state, that is, they go back to their home state for the purpose of voting. And because of this also, the politics of these destination states does not favor these migrants in terms of their political rights. So the vote bank politics pursued by these destination states favors more employment opportunities for the locals of that particular state. Now, another reason highlighted is that the central government policies favor rural development to limit migration to cities, and this has also constrained or limited a coherent policy. Further, the eShram portal, which provides for registration of workers who are working in the unorganized sector, does not distinguish between the target migrants and workers in the unorganized sector. So this article suggests that there is a need to distinguish these migrants who will register themselves on the eShram portal of Ministry of Labour. Now, another reason highlighted in this article is that the unorganized workers and urban poor are seen through similar lens. And because of this, it does not cover certain migrants who does not stay in the slum areas and rather stay outside the slum area on their work site. And some of these workers who stay on the work site work in the construction sector. So the article says that the policies of the central government combine the aspects or the problems of two, basically the unorganized worker and the urban poor. And because of this, there is a lack of a coherent policy for the migrants. So because of this combination of policy by the central government, the problems of migrants get mixed with the problems of workers in the informal sector. And so the problem of migrants are not addressed separately. Now, another concern highlighted by the article is that the official data of the Government of India is not able to capture internal migration which has taken place so far, and also the frequency of such migration over a period of years, especially post-COVID. So, capturing of proper data of migrants will help the central government and also the state government to pursue specific policy initiatives for such migrants. Now, these constraints has also led to various challenges for the migrant workers. The first of these challenges include their political exclusion in the destination states from various entitlements provided by that particular state government. The second challenge is regarding fragmented labor market. And because of this, they also face economic issues as it is often difficult for these migrant laborers and migrant workers to find job in the destination states. The third challenge is poor or bad working conditions for such migrant workers, and their condition is also exploited by their employer. The next challenge is a lack of union among these migrant workers, and because of lack of a union among the migrant workers, they are not able to seek their proper demand with respect to work and also wages. The next challenge is exploitation of migrant workers, as these challenges are not addressed by the Ministry of Labor of respective states. Now, there are also issues with respect to human trafficking of migrant workers, especially the female migrant workers. So, all these can be said to be a part of exploitation of migrant workers, and at times, these migrant workers are also denied their proper wages. Further, these migrant workers do not have proper legal safeguards in their destination states in which they are working. Also, because of the fact that most of these migrant workers are not registered as per the Interstate Migrant Workmen Regulation of Employment and Conditions of Service Act 1979. So, these are some of the challenges which are faced by these migrant workers in the destination states. Now, this article highlights that despite the constraints which has been highlighted here with respect to lack of coherent migrant policy, still some impressive initiatives have taken by certain states such as Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh and even Orissa. Here these states have deployed technology to track migrants and also to track delivery of welfare services provided to such migrants. Now, in this regard, Maharashtra has come up with migration track system especially for women and children. Now, generally, the Ministry of Labor at the center and also at the level of state is the nodal agency with respect to tracking and taking care of the migrant workers. However, in this regard, in Maharashtra, it is the Ministry of Women and Child Development under which the migration track system takes place, especially of women and children. Further, Chhattisgarh has employed the State Migrant Workers Policy. Now, this policy of the state government of Chhattisgarh registers migrant workers at the source and also keep a track of the migrant workers through the mobile phones. Now, NITI Aayog, in its draft national policy for migrant workers, has highlighted an important aspect of intercoordination within the ministries. And in this regard, the Planning and Convergence Department of State Government of Orissa provides multi-sectoral approach for the migrant workers rather than depending solely on the Ministry of Labor, which is generally the nodal ministry. So these can be said to be some of the impressive steps which has been taken by some of the states for the welfare of migrant workers. So the article concludes by providing a way forward whereby it suggests that the central government must play a more proactive role, especially with respect to strategic policy guidance for the migrant workers, and also should provide a platform for interstate coordination to register and also track the migrant workers. Further, the central government should also focus on addressing the issues of interstate migrants in the destination states where they face various challenges. Next, the article says that there is a need to implement NITI Aayog's draft policy on migrant workers. So, NITI Aayog's draft national policy on migrant workers provides for two approaches. The first approach is focused on caste transfer, special quota and reservation for such migrant workers, whereas the other aspect focuses on enhancing or improving the agency and capability of the community, through which the collective bargaining power of the migrant workers will increase. So it says that to enhance the agency and capability of the community and thereby removing such aspects which come in the way of an individual's own natural ability to thrive. So these are the two-way approach provided by the draft national policy on migrant workers by NITI Aayog. Further, the draft also favors a rights-based approach for such migrant workers. whereby migration, according to the draft, should be acknowledged as an integral part of the development, and government policy should not hinder but seek to facilitate internal migration within India. Now, this draft further highlighted some of the limitations of Interstate Migrant Workmen Act of 1979. Now, this act was legislated to protect the laborers or the migrant workers from exploitation by contractors, and this was done by safeguarding their right to non-discriminatory wages. And through this act, it was made mandatory for these contractors to register their establishment prior to employing any interstate migrant worker. However, this act covered only laborers migrating through a contractor and left out independent migrants. So the NITI Aayog in its draft has criticized this aspect of this particular act. Now, other aspect highlighted by NITI Aayog's draft is regarding intercoordination among various ministries of central government, state government, and even at local level. So it says that the draft identifies Ministry of Labour and Employment as the nodal ministry to implement the policies with respect to interstate migrant workers, and has also asked the ministry to create a special unit to converge all the activities of other ministries. So it says that this special unit will manage migration resource centers in high migration zones. It will also provide for a national labor helpline. It will link the worker households to government schemes and also provide for interstate migration management bodies. Further, the draft provides for institutional mechanism to coordinate between ministries, states, and local departments to implement programs for various migrants. Now, the draft says that the labor departments of the source state and also the destination state where the migrant worker is working should coordinate and work together through the migrant workers cell. An example has been highlighted with respect to Bihar. It says that labor officers from source states can be deputed to destination states. So it says that Bihar's experiment to have a joint labor commissioner at Bihar Bhavan in New Delhi can be said to be one such practice. Now, another aspect highlighted by the draft of NITI Aayog includes the aspect of data sets, where the draft has asked the ministries of Panchayati Raj, Rural Development, and Housing and Urban Affairs to use tribal affairs migration data to help create migration resource centers in high migration zone. Further, it has also asked the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship to focus on skill building at these centers. So the idea is to ensure that these migrants get proper employment opportunities in the destination states. Now, the draft also focuses on the education of the children of such migrant workers, and here it has asked the Ministry of Education to take measures under the Right to Education Act to mainstream migrants' children's education, to map migrant children, and also to provide local language teachers in migrant destination. So this step is to provide proper education to the children of such migrant workers. Further, to address the issues of housing, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs should address issues of night shelters, short stay homes, and also seasonal accommodation for migrants in cities. And regarding the legal help for such migrant workers, the National Legal Service Authority and Ministry of Labour should set up grievance handling cells and also fast-track legal responses to tackle issues of trafficking, minimum wage violations, and also workplace abuses and accidents for migrant workers. So these are some of the suggestions which have been provided by NITI Aayog's draft national policy on migrant workers. And it is here where the article suggests to implement this particular policy of NITI Aayog. Now, once this code is notified, it will subsume various laws including this one. And this code provides for facilities to interstate migrant workers, where it says that it shall be the duty of every contractor or the employer of an establishment employing interstate migrant workers in connection with the work of that establishment. And the duties include to provide suitable working conditions for such workers. In case of serious accident or bodily injury of such migrant worker, to report such incident to specified authorities of both states, that is the source state and the destination state, and also to the next of kin of the worker, and also to extend all benefits to such worker which are available to a worker of that establishment, including benefits under Employees State Insurance Act, Employees Provident Funds, and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952 or any other law, and also to provide for the facility of medical checkup as available to any other worker. So these are some of the facilities under the code which must be provided to a migrant worker as well. So on the issue of migration, we discussed various reasons for migration, various benefits for migration, challenges with respect to these workers, and also the reasons for lack of a coherent national migration policy. Further, we also discussed certain initiatives taken by the states of Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, and even Orissa. And we also discussed about NITI Aayog's draft national policy on migrant workers. So based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for mains. It says, discuss the need for a coherent national policy to address the challenges faced by interstate migrant workers in India. And this question carries 15 marks. Thus, this topic of internal migration becomes important both from the perspective of GS Paper 1 and also GS Paper 2. Under GS Paper 1, this topic gets covered under salient features of Indian society, population and associated issues, poverty and developmental issues, urbanization, their problems and remedies, effects of globalization on Indian society, and also social empowerment. Whereas under GS Paper 2, this topic gets covered under welfare schemes for the vulnerable sections of the population and the laws, issues relating to development and management of social sector or services, including health, education, etc., and also issues relating to poverty and hunger. So questions on the issue of migrants and challenges pertaining to migration in India can be asked by UPSC in the mains examination. So after understanding these various facets of internal migration, let's understand this article which talks about international migration, especially with respect to caste hierarchies. So this news in the text and context section discusses about a case study which has been published in Economic and Political Weekly with respect to international migration of men from 3 different communities, namely that of other backward class, most backward class, and scheduled caste. And the article appeared as International Migration and Caste Dynamics, 3 Villages in Tamil Nadu. So this article highlights that there is an interconnection between caste and international migration, and those belonging to other backward class as compared to the MBC and scheduled caste are better off. Further, this article also says that caste identities of migrants can influence migration patterns also and also its outcome. So, international migration in general is done for the purpose of enhanced earnings or enhanced livelihood opportunities, improvement in the standards of living, and also with respect to pursuing higher education. Now, here the article says that caste identities of migrants can influence migration patterns for both upper caste and also lower caste. And generally, the lower caste, whereby people belonging to the scheduled caste and Dalit community are compelled to go abroad for survival, as when they go abroad, they also work outside their caste-based occupation. Whereas for the upper caste, international migration is mostly a voluntary process for professional reasons, namely to enhance one's earnings and also improve standard of life or living. So this particular article is basically a case study for these 3 different communities belonging to 3 different castes. These 3 communities are the Colours community, who are the backward class and are the dominant land owning caste of the 3 villages which has been identified in this article, and they possess land and also livestock. The other community which has been studied is Mupanars, which are the most backward class, and they work as agricultural laborers in the land owned by Colours, that is these. And then there are the Parayars, who are the scheduled caste, and these people from the Parayars community are not allowed to work in the farms of Colours, and they are also engaged in manual scavenging in the state of Tamil Nadu. So this article with respect to these 3 different communities highlights about how international migration affects the 3 communities. So let us go through this particular case study which was published in the Economic and Political Weekly. Now we have already discussed in detail about internal migration pertaining to GS Paper 1 and GS Paper 2, whereas this article presents itself in the form of a case study. So this can also be viewed from the perspective of GS Paper 4. So in this article, let us understand the findings of this particular study. Now this findings has been distributed with respect to backward class, most backward class, and scheduled caste. Now for the backward class, that is the Colour community, they have managed their expenses from their personal savings to go abroad for the purpose of work. Whereas for the Mupanars and Parayars community, they have managed their expenses from borrowings from their friends, relatives, or even money lenders. Same was applicable for the men from Pariyar community. Now, the Kallar community, through their connections, found better jobs, or rather better paying jobs, and because of this, they were able to send higher remittances back to their home. And because they sent higher remittances to their wife, hence their wife did not work. Whereas remittances sent by the Mupanars and also the Parayars were not enough. And because of this, the wives of such men had to work. Now, wives of men belonging to the Mupanars community used to work in the farm of Kallars. And with respect to the Parayars, both husband and wives used to work together to meet their household expenses. So in the case of Kallar community, the women did not work because enough remittances were sent back, whereas with respect to MBC and scheduled caste communities, both husband and wife had to work to meet their household expenses. So for the Kallar community, remittances helped them to achieve economic solvency. Now, economic solvency can be said to be a long-term state that occurs when there is societal structure that supports gender equity and external resources are available and can be used by a woman who has necessary human capital, sustainable employment, and also independence. So men belonging to Kallar community sent enough remittances to achieve economic solvency, but economic solvency could not be achieved for the Mupanayar and the Parayar community. However, income earned for the MBC and for the scheduled caste community through the remittances was not enough, and because of this, the woman had to work to meet the household expenses. And the same aspect was applicable also for the Parayar community. Now, the Kallar community, being the dominant caste, had better job prospects through better communication and also financial resources. But this was not so for people belonging to most backward class and scheduled caste. So here the author has highlighted that for the people belonging to MBC and SC, there were discriminatory outcomes based on caste. Now, because of higher earnings, the members from Kallar community improved their social status and also their well-being in the society. But the same could not be said for the members of Mupanayars or Parayars. Further, the article says that women from the backward caste community made better educational progress, and also they had higher ownership of livestock as compared to the women belonging to Mupanayar or Parayar community. Now, another important aspect highlighted in this article is that the men, when they traveled abroad for work, they opted out of their caste-based occupation. But similar thing could not have been said for the wives of Mupanayar and Parayar community. So, the people belonging to the Kallar community worked in the construction sector or in the sectors of labor. And even men from Mupanayar and Parayar community, by working abroad, it helped them to move out of caste-based occupation. However, despite this fact of international migration for such men belonging to MBC and ST community, economic activities of Dalit and scheduled caste were still governed by caste-based occupations in India. So, the overall finding in this article highlights that men from MBC and Dalit communities shifted out of caste-based occupation, whereas women still pursued caste-based jobs to support their financial needs. So, for the MBC and the Dalit community, namely the Mupanayar and the Parayars, both men and women worked to meet their household expenses. Another point highlighted is that international migration proved more beneficial for men and women from the backward caste community, that is for the Kallars, and this also increased their socio-economic well-being and status and also privileges. However, international migration did not prove so beneficial for men belonging to scheduled caste or most backward class, as remittances sent back by these men were not enough to meet household expenses. And because of this, the wives also worked. So it says that international migration did not bring any substantial change in the lives of families, mainly belonging to MBC or SC community, namely the Parayars and the Mupanars. Now you can use this case study if a question is asked in the mains examination based on illustrations on the interconnection between caste and international migration. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 7 in the article section. It says Twitter governance in Telangana. It says that while the government is prompt in its responses through Twitter, however, this model of governance is far from being perfect. So based on this article, this question can be asked in your mains examination. So take this as your practice question for mains. So the question is, critically examine the use of Twitter by various government agencies, including ministries, to solve issues of governance. Now this question carries 10 marks. Now similar questions based on use of social media can also be asked by UPSC with respect to addressing the issues of governance. So in this regard, let's go through some of the benefits and also concerns with respect to this new model of governance referred in this article as Twitter model or Twitter governance. Now this article highlights about the example of Telangana, where the State Industry and Commerce Minister of Telangana, K.T. Rama Rao, is also known by his Twitter handles @KTR, @KTR Office and also @KTR TRS. And these Twitter handles helps the minister in providing prompt response to various aspects of governance and administration. And this has helped the state of Telangana not only in terms of administration but also in terms of delivering services and also attracting investments from industries. So in this backdrop of this use of Twitter governance, let's go through or understand some of the benefits with respect to Twitter governance. So the first benefit can definitely be said to be quick response, as the minister in charge or the administrator in charge knows the problem and is in a situation to handle such problems quickly. So quick response for such problems can be said to be one of the most important aspect of Twitter governance. The second benefit can be said to be for the citizens, as it provides an easy access to the corridors of power for the citizens, as citizens can directly communicate with the politicians or bureaucrats or even police officers to address their various concerns. So the second point can be said to be easy access for citizens. And because of this, the third point can be said to be that it promotes participatory governance from the citizens also. And overall, this model of governance also cater to the welfare governance, especially regarding implementation of various government welfare schemes pertaining to healthcare facilities and also education. Not only this, it also helps in attracting investment for the sector of healthcare and also education. So if you go through this particular article, it highlights as to how the healthcare sector in Telangana has attracted investments, especially through Twitter governance. And even the minister of Telangana has tweeted Elon Musk asking him to set up a Tesla unit in the state of Telangana. So it not only caters to the aspect of welfare governance, but also caters to the needs of industry and also provides a direct link for the industrialists and corporates to talk to the government on various aspects. So it not only addresses the concerns of the industry, but also promotes industrialization through easy access. Further use of Twitter also promotes e-governance in the state. Now, use of Twitter has proved very beneficial during the COVID crisis, as during the COVID crisis, most of the requests for oxygen beds or essential medicines were procured for through Twitter handles of the state government. So one of the major benefits of use of social media such as Twitter can be said to be the fact that it allows governments to share critical information in a crisis situation. And such handles can allow governments to create an open channel for communication or interaction with the citizens and also for further citizens' engagement. So all these can be said to be some of the benefits with respect to the Twitter model of governance. However, there are certain concerns as well. Now the first concerns include the fact that it is not accessible to the poor and also illiterates or those people who do not have access to internet. So it becomes difficult for such people who do not have access to internet and who are not tech savvy to reach out to the government officials or ministers to address their concerns. Now the second concern is that with respect to Twitter model of governance, there is no oversight mechanism available through any law. So if a citizen addresses certain problems through their Twitter handle, and if such problems are not addressed, then there is no oversight mechanism available if their concerns are not addressed. So there must be certain oversight mechanism with respect to non-performance of duties by any officer if any concern has been expressed by the citizen through such mechanism. The third concern is that use of Twitter as a response model is not backed by any law of the state. And also the fact that this practice of using Twitter handles to address concerns of citizens is not uniform across ministries, department or even government offices, either in the central government or at the level of state governments. So there is a need for uniformity with respect to Twitter model of governance. Now the fifth concern is that such kind of approach only provides a temporary approach or an ad hoc approach to solve the problems of citizens and cannot be said to be a permanent solution. Hence the government must ensure that use of Twitter governance is not an ad hoc approach and it is not used selectively by any particular minister or by any particular administrative office or by any bureaucrat. Now the next concern highlighted here is that it is not good for such states who lag far behind in literacy rates. Now example of Telangana has been taken in this case, whose literacy rate is as high as 72.8%, whereas other states lag far behind in terms of literacy rate, and also there is an issue of urban-rural divide, as most of the citizens of India live in rural areas, as these people living in rural areas have limited broadband access or limited access to use of internet. So these can be said to be some of the concerns with respect to the Twitter model of governance. So as a conclusion, you can end your answer by saying that yes, definitely the use of Twitter model of governance is a healthy practice for good governance and it also promotes e-governance. But such model of governance must be accompanied by regular governance mechanism by the administration. Further, Twitter governance must be promoted for faster delivery of services along with inbuilt regulation or inbuilt mechanism to ensure accountability in case of non-performance of duties by officers or any minister. So this is how you can end your conclusion in case a question is asked based on critical analysis on the use of Twitter governance or use of social media to address governance issues. Thus, this article becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 2 from the aspect of governance. With this, let's take up the next article. The next news to be taken up appears on page number 12. Now, this news says IPCC report may spell death knell for coal-based units. It highlights that Central Electricity Authority said that India has about 211 gigawatts of operational coal-fired power plants, which is 10% of global capacity. So, if we want to limit the global greenhouse gas emission, then all such coal-fired power plants needs to be shut down, which do not have the technology to capture and store carbon. So, in this regard, we need to know about this technology which captures and stores carbon. So, IPCC in its report has stated that in order to limit global warming, there is a need for major transition in the energy sector, whereby there is a need for substantial reduction in the use of fossil fuel based plants such as coal. There is a need for widespread electrification process. There is a need for improved energy efficiency, and the governments of the world should think of an alternative fuel beside coal, petrol and diesel such as green hydrogen. So with respect to limiting greenhouse gas emission, the IPCC in its report has suggested that there is a need for major transition in the energy sector across the world. However, the problem with respect to India is that most of the plants in India are coal-fired power plants. Further, the IPCC report has also stated that there is a need for deep emission reduction across all sectors. As for the year 2010 and 2019, average annual greenhouse gas emission has been at the highest levels in human history. Now, despite this warning, the IPCC in its report has stated that if right sort of policies are pursued with respect to use of right kind of technology and infrastructure, if it is in place, then such policies, technology and infrastructure together will help to make changes in our lifestyle and also behavior. And this change will help to reduce greenhouse gas emission from 40% to 70% by 2050. So these are some of the important highlights of the report of IPCC. Now, apart from this, let us also understand as to how carbon capture and storage works. So it says that this is defined as a separation, transportation and sequestration of carbon dioxide arising from burning of fossil fuels. So this process involves three major steps. Number 1, capturing CO2 at the source. Number 2, compressing the carbon dioxide for transportation. And number 3, injecting it deep into a rock formation at carefully selected and safe site where such carbon dioxide can be permanently stored. So the process involves capturing of carbon dioxide at the source, compressing this carbon dioxide for transportation, and then transporting it to a location of site where it is permanently stored. So regarding storage, it says that CO2 is injected into deep underground rock formations, usually at a depth of 1 kilometer or more, as you can see in this particular picture. So the three process with respect to carbon capture and storage includes capture of carbon dioxide at the source, compressing of carbon dioxide for transportation purpose, and then storing the compressed CO2 at a site which is approx a kilometer or more in depth within the rocks. Thus, this article becomes important mainly from your prelims perspective with respect to environment, and from your mains, this topic gets covered under GS paper 3. With this, let's take up the next two articles also from the perspective of prelims examination. Now, this news appears on page number 12. It says Biological E to receive mRNA vaccine technology from WHO. Hub can manufacture products beyond COVID vaccines. Now, this particular question was asked with respect to mRNA vaccine in 2016. The question was, in the context of the developments in bioinformatics, the term transcriptome, sometimes seen in the news, refers to number of options were given such as a range of enzyme used in genome editing, full range of mRNA molecules expressed by an organism, description of the mechanism of gene expression and mechanism of genetic mutations taking place in cells. And this, the correct answer was B, that is full range of mRNA molecules expressed by an organism. And here M refers to messenger RNA. So it says that a transcriptome is the full range of messenger RNA or mRNA molecules expressed by an organism. And this term can also be used to describe the array of mRNA transcripts produced in a particular cell or tissue type. Now it further highlights that in contrast with the genome, which is characterized by its stability, transcriptome actively changes. So transcriptome are not stable. So it says that in fact an organism's transcriptome varies depending on many factors such as stage of development and also environmental conditions. So transcriptome is full range of mRNA molecules expressed by an organism. Now with respect to mRNA vaccine, we also need to have a clear understanding with respect to its comparison with DNA based vaccine. So it says that the principle of messenger RNA vaccines and DNA vaccines are same, and both DNA and RNA vaccines deliver the message to the cell to create desired protein so that the immune system creates a response against this protein. Now both mRNA and DNA vaccine produces a specific portion of the virus, that is the spike protein in case of COVID virus, that is the coronavirus. Both are laboratory made structures and not obtained from actual virus. Both DNA and RNA based vaccines are touted for their cost effectiveness and ability to be developed more quickly as compared to traditional vaccines. Now this is because the traditional vaccines often rely on actual viruses, whereas the DNA or RNA based vaccine is made from a specific portion of the virus, and in case of coronavirus from the spike protein. So both DNA and RNA based vaccines takes less time as compared to a traditional vaccine. Now this is because both these vaccines rely on the genetic code, which is not a live virus or a bacteria. And this also makes these vaccines more cheap as compared to a traditional vaccines. However, there are certain differences as well between mRNA vaccine and DNA based vaccine. The first point is that DNA based vaccine is much easy to prepare in a laboratory, and DNA based vaccines are around 10 times cheaper as compared to mRNA vaccine or messenger RNA vaccines. The next point highlighted is that DNA based vaccine has to enter the nucleus of the cell to produce spike protein. So here DNA based vaccine has to enter the nucleus, which is here. Whereas messenger-based RNA vaccine uses ribosomes in the cytoplasm to produce the spike protein. So these are the ribosomes in the cytoplasm which is used by the mRNA messenger RNA-based vaccine. So it says that in case of DNA vaccine, entry into the nucleus is required, and hence safety concerns are more for DNA-based vaccines. So this is the difference between DNA-based vaccine and mRNA-based vaccine. Now moving to the last news for today's discussion, appearing on page number 14 in the economy section, it says manufacturing slows to 6-month low according to PMI. Now PMI is Purchasers Managing Index. So the news says that the S&P Global India Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index slid to 54 in March from 54.9 in February. So we understand that this index is released monthly. However, we need to understand what is the meaning of any score above 50 or below 50. Now it highlights about understanding the index value. Here it says a figure above 50 denotes expansion in business activity and anything below 50 denotes contraction. So from our prelims perspective, we need to know that who publishes Purchasing Managers Index. So this data is published by Japanese firm NITI and compiled and constructed by Market Economic. PMI is calculated on the basis of information received from companies on various factors, which represents demand conditions. Now PMI is very different from Index of Industrial Production, which is indicative of actual production. So it says that PMI takes in response from a company on a monthly basis on whether there has been improvement, deterioration, or no change for a set of parameters relative to previous month. It further says that PMI takes into account the following parameters for calculation: new orders, output, employment, suppliers, delivery, and also stock of purchases. And the set of questionnaire is provided to 500 private sector companies and a comprehensive score is then arrived at. Further, PMI is constructed separately for manufacturing and services sector. However, the manufacturing sector with respect to PMI holds more importance. That's why this news says that PMI for manufacturing slows down for a 6-month low. Now PMI is generally released at the start of the month, much before most of the official data on industrial output, manufacturing and GDP growth becomes available. That's why PMI is considered as a good leading indicator of economic activity. Now if we compare PMI with IIP, then PMI is published by NITI, which is a Japanese firm, whereas IIP is published by National Statistical Office. PMI does not track the actual production, whereas IIP actually tracks the actual production. PMI covers only 500 private sector companies, whereas IIP covers both private sector as well as public sector undertakings. PMI covers both manufacturing and services. IIP covers only the manufacturing sector. Now PMI can be said to be less comprehensive since it covers only private sector companies, whereas IIP can be said to be more comprehensive in its approach and jurisdiction. Now PMI is not used for GDP calculation, whereas IIP is used for GDP calculation to account for the unorganized sector. So these can be said to be some of the differences with respect to PMI and also Index of Industrial Production. So after understanding this news, let's take up the question for the day. So the question for the day is with reference to Purchasing Managers Index, consider the following statements. First, it is published by NITI and tracks the actual production of the goods in the economy. Second, the PMI is limited in scope since it covers only the private sector companies. Question is, which of the statements given above are correct? Options are A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2, and D, neither 1 nor 2. Now coming to the answer of yesterday, the answer is 1 and 3 only with respect to this question on near field communication technology, which was also asked in 2015 in the prelims of UPSC. So with this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you for watching DNS.